All right, John, welcome back to Portland.
Always good to be here.
Always good to have you here.
Yeah.
Last time you were here, we did a podcast and we talked about the series that you shot with us, which was your first series. Yep. I think your first ever instructional series, and you shot one shortly after with BJJ Fanatics as well.
Yep.
And the one you did for us was on Universal Sprawl,
Right.
and we talked about that. And this time you shot two.
Right.
So we did one on a particular grip, which is a 2-on-1 grip, and one on defending against, for lack of a better term, the newer leg lock game.
Yes.
And so let's start with that second one, defending against the newer leg lock game. What made you decide that would be your topic?
So I was on sabbatical 2 years ago, and that gives me a lot of time to do research for work, but also gives me more time to concentrate on Jiu Jitsu. And so in the year leading up to that sabbatical, I thought about what I wanted to concentrate on. And for me, that's the same question as what I felt deficient in. And I felt like lower body attacks, all leg locks, regardless of rule set, and guillotines were my two weakest points for the two far ends of the body. Mm-hmm. And so I made a real conscious decision to work leg locks really intensively from about 2 years ago, and that kept going into last year, even though I wasn't finished with sabbatical. And I was working mostly like a balance, 50-50 balance of offensive and defense. But, you know, that gets to be too big for one seminar. It gets to be too big for one instructional series. And then I was watching the open guard seminar that Coach Henry did at Portland. And it was just Q&A. It wasn't really part of the curriculum. But someone asked about, well, you're here dangling, and what about footlocks? And he gave a really good explanation of weight transfer and how that really shuts everything down. If it doesn't shut down, it slows it down to manageable speed. And I thought, well, why don't I focus on that for a while for my defense and see what comes out of it? So I started focusing on that, and a lot of like really closely connected and simple defensive positions came out of that. So that's kind of the beginning of the seminar or the instructional series.
Yeah, that piece of that seminar too, that changed how I teach open guard. And the new Fundamental 5 of open guard that I've been teaching, but that piece about weight transfer is pretty unique. I haven't seen that anywhere else, and it does change everything.
Yes. I think, the fact that, I mean, from the top, it's pretty commonsensical, right? To use gravity and commit your weight. Yeah. From the bottom, most people don't think it's possible yet, until they're shown.
How to transfer their weight to the top guy. Now, you and I have talked before. You started Jiu Jitsu what year?
94.
Yeah, so we started around the same time, and in the early 90s, there was leg locks, and there was heel hooks, there was leg lock counters and heel hook counters. So what do you think? What, if anything, when people start talking about the new leg lock game, what are they talking about that's distinct from what we did back then?
So straight foot locks, I think, have remained pretty similar. People get better and more accurate, but more or less the straight foot lock game and the straight foot lock defenses are quite similar. The heel hook game has gotten a lot more sophisticated and a lot more dangerous. So when we all learned, you get caught in a heel hook and you got to go with it, because if you go the opposite way, you break your own leg. And I forget if it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, but if anyone who's interested in what I'm talking about, just go watch Ryan Hall, BJ Penn in the UFC. Yeah. BJ gets caught in an entanglement, but not a finishing position yet. He rotates the wrong way and blows his own knee out. And Ryan Hall was just kind of trying to hold him, not finish him yet. And so that's obviously wrong. And so what people thought was, well, I got to go with the force, and then eventually put a foot on the butt or put a foot on the hamstring, push and pull, get my knee out.
Do you think BJ had not recognized the grip?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
Just didn't understand the mechanics of it. Yeah. And I have to say this as well, because I rolled with BJ when I was a brown belt. He was so flexible, so strong, so intuitive.
Used to kind of.
That I think he gumbied out of some of that stuff, and now he has 40-year-old ligaments instead of 20-year-old ligaments. That could be it too. Yeah. Or wear and tear from using attributes for so long. Yeah. Probably a combination of all those things. In any case, the new school is they know that because that's where they started as well. They expect that, and they'll let you turn about 360 degrees. And it just gets worse the deeper into that turn you get. The initial turn takes away pressure, but increases exposure, right? If you went the other way, you'd increase pressure, but you'd decrease exposure. So you take the quick way out, but it's not the easy way. You take the quick way out, that increases exposure, so you get a deeper bite on your heel. They're able to move their legs into positions where when they start, they're pushing your knee in the same direction as they're cranking your heel. And so you can go that way. But as they rotate through, they're going to take one turn and turn their knees in the opposite direction. So by the time you get 360 degrees, if not less, but maximum probably 360 degrees, in that turn they've reoriented it so their knees are going to the right while your heel comes to the left. Yeah. And it's just checkmate if you rotate that way.
And so that addition, they funneled, they realized that's the counter, that's the proper counter. It's the one we all learned. Everybody's going to do that. They're going to go that direction. So they figured out how to treat that position and shut down that position, which then necessitates us figuring out how to unhook ourselves from that spot.
Correct.
And so unhooking yourself from that one spot after the first turn is basically the thrust of what's new. Right?
Yeah, the real key, at least for heel hooks, is always to slip your heel before you rotate in either direction. So if my heel is caught, really caught by someone who knows what they're doing, I don't have any business rotating. One direction just breaks me, but the other direction gets me in deeper. So it's about knowing how to configure your leg, your knee joint, and your ankle joint to 180 instead of 90. Go in a little bit deeper, just like if someone's trying to punch you and you stay there and do this, you get punched in the face, but if you clinch, you're actually safer even though you're closer. There's some commonalities there, going into it first, slipping your heel, and then you're free to rotate. But you rotate the way that would have been dangerous had they had your heel, rather than rotating the way that used to be safe and re-exposing your heel.
And having watched you shoot the videos, been there all day during the shoot and watched the seminar today, seems like you have with that curriculum, you've got pretty much all of it covered. So if somebody just focuses on what you're showing there, they're going to be able to defend it theoretically, have the tools to be able to defend it against any footlock attack.
And part of it is the way I teach. I've always said I like to go 12, 3, 6, 9, and let other people figure out 149 in 36 minutes. But it's all there. If you blend 3 and 12, if you blend 6 and 3, it's all there. And people can throw all kinds of crazy things at you, but if you understand it structurally, it's closer to one than the other. It's more like one than the other, and that's going to be your initial defense.
And it fits so well with everything else we've been doing, like that open guard. So one thing, you and I have talked about this before too, but the Rikson style of Jiu Jitsu, which is Jiu Jitsu for fighting, blends together seamlessly. Top, passing, body, all together. And this kind of fits into that matrix really well.
I wouldn't have, if it didn't, I wouldn't have really worked on it.
That's what I was thinking.
And I was trying to see how it would, and then just it was more of a Q&A than part of the seminar. What Henry did in that Q&A kind of clicked there.
Nice. And now the second series that we have, you talked about a 2-on-1 grip. What made you decide to do a whole series on one grip?
So at first I was just using it to defend guard passes, and so that's obviously not a series. But then I realized there's a lot of ways to get reversals from there, to get submissions from there, and so we've talked about this a lot. Everything starts as a kind of hypothesis, and you do some experiments, and if 2 or 3 experiments in, it just starts to crumble. It's just a trick, and like magic tricks, you can get fooled 100 times, but the moment either the magician tells you or someone beside the magician tells you, you'll never be fooled again. It's completely visible. Wow, how did I ever not know that? It'll never work again. So that's not good jiu-jitsu. So I try and see, am I just tricking this guy? And when he figures it out, is it not going to work? But I tell people exactly what I'm going to do. I keep telling them, okay, now switch your hips. Now put your shin in. Now try to go north-south. Now try and run to my back. So I try to run through. If they go backwards, they're going back into my guard, so that's not a problem. But anything they can do to come forward, I just keep adding elements and adding resistance. And, this thing kept being scalable. I was like, oh, it works here. Okay. I can keep plugging in things where I'm not letting go of the grip or letting go and reestablishing the grip all the way to, back position. So all the way around to north-south to this side to my back, basically everything. And you can use it to wouldn't really work that well against mount, holding on to someone's one wrist. But it's very easy to use that to deny knee on belly and deny mount because you just jam it across their hip.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you know, just the hypothesis kept working, and the experiments kept being repeatable, and I was like, okay, this is
So now there's a whole game
worth
there.
worth adding.
Yeah, and it again doesn't violate any of the base. Anybody that has good solid fundamentals be able to pick that up pretty much right away and start to use it.
Yeah.
Well, so that on your last sabbatical you were working leg locks and guillotines. What are you working on now?
Still leg locks and guillotines.
Okay.
Yeah, I really feel, I mean, I never don't work everything, but in terms of like concentrating or feeling that I really need to, so leg locks and guillotines are the only place where I feel like I still need to add volume, quantity. Everything else I have is just refining it. Like, I don't think I need new tricks from the mount or new tricks from the back. It's just refining what I have, and you know, it's just fundamentals and getting those sharper and sharper and sharper. So I got Rikson, Hodger, Henry. It's just like, it's never volume.
Right.
It's three things you can't stop.
Depth, not breadth.
Yeah, three things you can't stop, even though you know it's coming.
Yeah.
So with all my positions, not all, but most of my positions, I feel like that's what I need to be doing. Guillotine, I'm getting closer to that. Just
focus on the defense again.
Start with the defense.
Yeah.
But even on offense, I feel like there's a little bit more I could get with the guillotine, and now with the leg locks, I'm getting closer on defense, but with offense, I still want to work on it.
Yeah.
You know, intensively.
Yeah.
While working on everything else, but yeah, I feel like as a coach, it's a disservice to my guys who want to compete if they don't understand leg locks well. Even if they don't use them offensively, it's ubiquitous now. Everyone's doing leg locks.
Yeah.
It'll go through like the berimbolo. It'll cycle through, but for now, you can get surprised. Right?
Yeah. It's the current fad.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the things we've all heard over the years about leg locks. So the first, and there's reasons for all of them.
Sure.
So the first one is talking about heel hooks being very dangerous,
Yeah.
which is why, is it after Brown you can do it in IBJJF?
Not even, no, IBJJF gi, you still can't heel.
Can't do it at all.
Okay. That's changing.
You can do figure four.
Yes. Okay. Brown belt.
At
Knee bar
brown
and
belt.
figure four, not until brown belt.
And the reasoning behind that is safety.
Correct.
And what do you think about that? Do you think?
Yeah. So if the leg attacks are taught correctly and practiced correctly, especially like the rotational stuff like heel hooks, you have to when it's put on you, you have to understand that it's tension, not pain, that is your signal to tap. It never hurts until it flows out. And so you have to distinguish between a lot of slack in that system and a lot of connection and tension in that system, and then respect your partner for getting you that position and tap.
Yeah.
Now in a fight, you can make a calculated choice about letting it go and fighting and worrying about the hospital after you win your gold medal. That's all a different thing. I'm talking about day in and out training for normal people, and of course for world champions too. You get injured in the gym, you're not doing that in a super fight or a world championship. You got to save that one really horrible choice for the super fight. Right? You can't be doing that in the gym. But yeah, because and I do credit John Donaher largely with this, because now, mostly due to his influence, leg locks have been put into the Jiu Jitsu matrix where you're dominating the position first, and then you're taking a grip, and then you're applying pressure, right? So it's posture, connection, pressure. And leg locks done that way. I mean, it's like if you can hold me in mount for 20 minutes, you don't have to be that violent. You can just cycle, cross choke, Americana, whatever, head and arm, like a hammer fist choke. And I'm going to get caught, right? I'm going to get caught if I can't get you off mount. And in leg locks, if you can keep someone in a position where there's maximum exposure of their lower body and minimum exposure of yours, right? How much, I mean, you see MMA fights where people will punch up from the mount or punch you when you're on their back, but it's like, it's just a show. It doesn't hurt anybody. It's a show for the judges. There are leg positions where I can have you completely wrapped up, and you might hand fight with me or do all these things, but I know I'm not in danger. It's basically I'm attacking, you're defending, and I think you know, he largely figured out that system. And so, you know, you can put on a heel hook in ultra slow motion, and if the person gets injured, it's because they were super stubborn, not because you just like ripped it and they didn't have time to tap.
Right. Right. If it's taught that way in the academy. Right?
Yeah.
And what about for MMA? So I talked to some of our MMA coaches like John and some of the others. Kavanaugh would be the first to say they spend a lot less time on that. Not to say they won't spend time on it, because you'll still see heel hooks and what, but his fight team's not spending the kind of time on that the submission only no-gi grappler spend.
Yeah.
Because again, you're putting yourself in a position where you're going to get punched in the face.
Yes. Right? Yeah. And so Gary Tonin is awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love watching him. His instructionals are good. Super good. But he's making the crossover from submission grappling to MMA, and it gave him trouble in his last fight. He kind of dove on a heel hook like it was submission grappling, and he got knocked out.
Yeah.
And 10 times maybe he gets that 5 times. I'm not sure. He's good, but it's a risky business. When strikes are involved, for sure.
Not like if you go for an arm lock and you're mounted, or cross sides and you go for an Americana, you lose it, but you maintain position, you're still on top and you can hit.
Yes.
Basically forfeiting your position by jumping off of them. So
or volunteering to be on bottom.
Volunteering to be on bottom. Yeah. It's not usually a good strategy.
Right.
Well, what else? So that's super interesting, and I know a lot of people are going to want to watch that series. That's not why we shot it, but it helps that the marketplace is there.
Yeah.
But I thought it was really important to put that piece in so that all our gyms can have access to that information.
Yeah, I do feel like I feel like the great thing about SBG is I think in almost every position we're pretty squared away.
Yeah.
And it gets better all the time. Reconnect with Rikson, connect with Henry. It's just like it just keeps getting better in the very high percentage fundamental positions. But there are some of these fringe games that are moving towards center.
Yeah.
Right, where we're like I think lower body attacks, where learning to defend well doesn't take a giant investment.
No, because it blends with all the fundamental jiu-jitsu somebody already has. So it still goes back to fundamentals.
Yeah. And so I would say it's a little bit like striking. If you want to be a great striker, if you want to be a pro boxer, you have to choose to stand at boxing range,
right,
and just believe that it's better for you than it is for him. But if both of you are ready to be knocked out at any second,
right,
but you're choosing that, and leg locks are a little bit like that.
Yeah.
We're going to sit facing each other, and I think it's better for me, and you think it's better for you. So there is a structural element to leg locks that is different. So people will be like, it's all the same, and I try to demystify it in my seminar. But one thing I should say where it's not all the same is that if you're on my back, there's a real asymmetry there that I have to deal with.
Yeah.
I can do something like that, but 95% it's you attacking, me defending. If you mount me, 95% or more, it's you attacking, me defending.
Right.
Whereas leg locks, there's a lot of mutual exposure, like boxing. So, but also like boxing, if all I wanted to do was clinch, and there wasn't a ref to say break, 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 which is what a boxing ref does 300 times a match.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be that hard to hang on to someone and not let them knock you out.
Right.
And so in leg locks too, the defense of it, if you're not wanting to sit there in range and shoot it out, is not as hard.
Right.
Just like boxing would be.
The extra time would come from wanting to work the offense.
You wanted to. That's voluntary. I think defense is kind of mandatory.
Yeah.
And quicker. That's the good news.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. So what else are you thinking about now in terms of jiu-jitsu games and jiu-jitsu in general? What have you been pondering or?
So, I'm trying to start. So with the same way SBG starts, where you have base, you have posture, you have connection. It's like there's a pyramid,
right?
And we're limited by two-dimensional posters, but it's better to think of it like a thick pyramid, right, in every direction, building up to this sweep or this submission. These things that are kind of random, like I don't have as much control over that.
Right.
It depends on the reaction, but I have a lot of control over my base and my posture and my connection, right? Submissions are more like, are they pushing my face? Are they pushing my body? Is there back exposure? That's like more reciprocal. Mm-hmm. Right? Whereas I feel like I can almost control my base. Of course, someone's trying to break my posture, but it's more under my control.
Right.
And so going away from jiu-jitsu, I'm trying to think about, okay, it's all jiu-jitsu, but getting away from that physical jiu-jitsu where we slap hands and we roll for 5 minutes. It's like, okay, what are the life equivalents of the base posture connection that I can control no matter who's in front of me? Might not work because the guy in front of me is a 250-pound black belt world champion, but I'm doing it right. They're just smashing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not worried about, did I lose today? Did I win today? It's like, did I do good jiu-jitsu today? Because like you said, what you're doing, not how you're doing, right?
Right.
Yeah. I'm worried about what I'm doing. How I'm doing is, Zach's going to have problems because of Zach, not because my jiu-jitsu is bad.
Right.
And his is good. So moving that off the mat, and it's like, okay, so my sleep, my hydration, my meditation, my yoga, like no one can stop me from doing that except myself. I'm the only one who's gonna decide to eat like shit, sleep 3 hours a night, get drunk, skip the workouts that aren't jiu-jitsu like yoga and stuff, or meditation, So trying to keep that really consistent.
Focusing on your base.
Yeah, that's the base that you build from, right? One thing I'll say about yoga, because it's just like jiu-jitsu. So we had a really productive visit in February, jiu-jitsu wise, and just even outside of jiu-jitsu, like my life base. And so I went back to do yoga, and I've been doing yoga off and on since I've been doing jiu-jitsu, because I always knew it was a good pair, and Rikson was into it, and I just knew. But I would always be, I'll do it twice a week, or I'll do it 3 times a week. And then you're only doing it 3 times a week, so it's not really part of your lifestyle. So then you drink one night and you don't go the next morning, so it's twice a week. And I guess if you've been doing something for 20 years, twice a week is adequate for maintenance. But if you're starting to learn something twice a week, it could be a little bit less than ideal. So I went back and I'm like, well, these are all interconnected. So I just went in and immediately signed up for yoga every day. And I go to a kind of famous place. I like it. I don't go there because they're famous. I go there because I like it. But they're closed on Saturday, Sunday because they do a lot of teacher training. And I'm not interested or good enough to do teacher training, but they're open to non-teachers like myself Monday through Friday. So it's like, okay, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. It's cheaper if you go at 7 a.m. because it's a smaller class. And if you promise only to go at 7 a.m., it's cheaper. So every morning, 7 a.m. So what does that do? Well, that means I got to get up at 5:30. So that means I got to go to bed. That means I don't want to drink. That means I got to go to bed, at like 9 or 10. It just, everything cleans up, or everything kind of scatters.
Right.
There's momentum to jiu-jitsu. There's momentum to just good lifestyle choices, even off the mat. So things like that I've just been focusing on, like having a synergistic effect of not like, oh, I can go in the morning, but if I oversleep, I'll go at 7 at night. But then someone invites me to dinner, so I don't go at all. And just prioritizing base.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you have base and posture. Almost 2 words for the same thing, except base is a little more specific. You start with your connection to the ground.
Yeah.
Where do you see that in terms of connection? The big picture for connection.
Out off the mat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So without connection, we always talk about jiu-jitsu. Can't move other people. I can't move Zach. He's not going to move, but I can move myself. But without connection, you don't know where to move.
Right.
You're moving in infinite space relative to no one and nothing. But once you have connection, it's not connection to bench pressing. It won't work. But it's connection to know where I need to move.
Right.
And so with my wife, with my daughter, with my friends, with all you guys, what I'm teaching, it's sort of like the non-physical connection. It's like, unless I really put myself in the best posture or base, and then really connect to someone, even if I'm trying to be nice, I could be offensive. Even if I'm trying to move to a spot that makes it more comfortable, I could move to a spot, metaphorically, that makes them more uncomfortable. So I guess connection like that, like trying to be a little less, I've never been like solipsistic where it's all about me, but trying to be less selfish maybe. And it's funny because it's like being less selfish for somewhat selfish reasons, because it's better for me too, on the mat and off the mat, if I'm doing that.
Yeah,
right.
you'll be happier.
Yeah, right. And so you know how it is. Like both our wives are quite a bit physically smaller than we are, but you're not going to move them into places that don't want to be moved.
No.
You can only move yourself into what you feel is the best place, and then hope.
Yeah.
So just try to take that off the mat as well.
Yeah, that's a good lesson.
Well, maybe another thing that's totally related. You have base, you have posture, you have connection. One of the better questions I got today, and I got a couple versions of it, was a question of ratio, right?
Ratios, yeah.
Because
Pete asked about
yeah, and I think that's a very good question too, because if you think of real base and posture, and we're always looking at a pyramid, I think that's good. You can have base and posture, even maybe connection, that veers too hard in one direction. So it's like, this is so good against one position, but if the person moves, you stumble forward or you stumble backwards, or they're behind your back or something. So, whether it's, the question today, by the way, was about leg locks. Oh, I went to this academy in Europe, and they're 50% of the time is spent on leg locks. It's like ratio or emphasis or balance, right? I don't know what the right word for it is. I guess ratio is what we're talking about. Like the ratio of top to bottom, to offense to defense, to guard to mount to cross sides. To me, that should be 100% as equal as possible. Just like a pyramid should be like perfectly stable, and all of the sides are equilateral and perfectly stable in every direction. So yeah, I want my practice to be like that too. Now, if you have a weak point and you're emphasizing that more than other things, that's not the same as Pete talking about. They do 50% that, and everything else is like 50 things divided by the remaining 50%. So it's 1%, 1%, 1%. It's that I feel I'm trying for this pyramid, and this side's a little short, which makes it just a little bit teetery, and I'm just trying to restore balance, not get out of balance, right? Or restore the proper ratio.
Right.
And to do that, you up your weaknesses a little bit, but as soon as they even out, then everything falls back to that. We do everything. It's not gi, it's not no gi, it's not punching, it's not punching. It's like, yeah, it's not guard, it's not mount. I'm trying really to cover everything equally. Yeah.
It's not just ratios, right? It's you mentioned it yesterday, but triage. Right?
Mention what?
If you have a
Yeah,
white belt,
so it's ratios and triage.
if you get a white belt who can't escape cross-sides bottom, but they want to learn heel hooks and buggy chokes.
Yes, order of importance and triage. Yeah, like you have way bigger fish to fry, before you ever get down to that.
It's like those classic memes that are going around now about Jiu Jitsu, where it's somebody climbing a stair and they're stepping over all the really important stuff. It's a white belt to get the new submission off of YouTube.
Yeah.
That would be an example of being out of balance.
Yes.
Which I think was the point he was trying to get at, because the school he went to was, I think the majority of what they did was actually leg locks. I don't think that I don't travel around to non-SBGs very often, but I do have contact with the people who do. And it seems like that's a new trend, right? That you're gonna see schools that focus on that.
Yeah, but you will also notice that it's not surprising. Like the best people at any of the more specialized games. I'm thinking of like Gordon Ryan and John Donner himself, Gordon Ryan, Gary Tonin, these guys. The people who finished a lot of people with leg locks and had pretty sophisticated leg lock games, as soon as anyone figures that out a little bit or runs away from it, all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, you finished him with a guillotine. Oh wow, you mounted him and he couldn't get out. Oh wow, you took his back and rear naked choked him. They're not 50% leg locks.
No,
they're in total balance. Yeah. Their leg locks are good because other people weren't aware of them.
Yeah.
But those guys are putting in equal time. The mount is awesome. The back is awesome. Their passing is awesome. They're not fringe at all. I know, because dumb people see them for a 6-month season out of 20 years of practice, for the 6-month season where they're surprising people with leg locks. And like, oh, throw everything away. It's all leg locks. It's just, really unsophisticated way to understand jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And they can go after the legs because their leg defense is so good, and that if you turn away, they're on your back. Yeah. If you fall backwards, they're mounting. That all the other pieces are there.
Absolutely.
I think Gordon Ryan is just doing it to just prove that. I'm like, all I'm going to do is mount you, and choke you with my belly,
Yeah.
and you can't even do anything about it.
You can see he's
Yeah.
rock solid
Yeah.
everywhere. So not a leg lock guy.
No.
The other thing too that I noticed back in the day if I introduced footlocks to white belts, you'd always have somebody who would refuse to attempt to pass the guard
Sure.
and just became the footlock guy in the gym.
Yeah.
And they were useful for everybody else to learn how to defend against footlocks, but it really handicapped their own personal jiu-jitsu when they took their learning curve from here to here, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard if they're successful with it, percentage of time, it's very hard sometimes to explain to a student like that. Why don't you try something else, you know, so you can learn how to pass the guard, for example.
Yeah.
It can be tricky. But I've seen that happen one or a few times. And
Sure.
it seems like leg locks, the leg lock game in particular, appeals to that kind of student more than most other things. Leg lock or guillotine, leg lock or guillotine.
Yeah, I've seen it as well. And I think I think it's good for coaches to teach leg locks, defense, and then offense.
Yeah.
But also be fairly proactive about warning people this is not a substitute for guard passing.
Yeah.
In fact, for me, if I'm doing leg locks from the top, which I don't do that much because I'd rather just pass.
Yeah.
But there are certain places where it fits in really well, like off the back step and stuff. You're not even going to get the leg locks in anyone good if you're hunting for them.
Right.
They come precisely because the person's so horrified of the guard.
You're threatening to
They
pass.
forget about their legs.
Yeah.
Either they're in open guard throwing their legs everywhere because it's that or get past.
Yeah.
Or they're underhooking you and thinking, oh, I'm going to defeat the pass on your back step.
Yeah.
But it's all because your passing is so threatening that they have to kind of forget about or sacrifice the legs.
Yeah.
If you're just grabbing feet, you're going to get nobody good, ever.
Yeah. You and I have talked about going down together at some point and training with Rikson, which I'm sure we'll do again sometime. But if you could ask him one or two jiu-jitsu questions that perplexed you, if he was here right now, what would you ask him?
So not about leg locks at all, just any jiu-jitsu question.
Any
Yeah,
what would you have access to that? Right?
Yeah. I would just want to feel what he's doing in a couple positions.
Yeah.
I'd want to feel his back control with the legs only that allows him to go double over.
Yeah.
Right? I'd want to feel exactly, I'd move very slowly, just what does he do so he doesn't need a seatbelt. That would be one thing, because he'd explain it and I still wouldn't be able to do it. But if I felt it, I'd be closer to being able to do it.
Yeah.
Right? That would be one thing.
That's how he teaches.
Yeah. And then also, okay, now I feel how you're controlling me here. Now, even slow motion, like you start to choke and I do this, and then what? And just see his clearing sequences and stuff. And I know they're not techniques that are set in stone. It's all based on feel. And so I'd want to go real slow and give him, like, what about this? The different hand positions, and just naturally what he's going to do to navigate through those hand positions. That would be one thing, because I know intellectually, watching Henry and hearing explanations, that is the superior way to do it. It's the way I pass, right? And it's what I preach. Like, use your upper body to control your upper body, and use your lower body to do the lower. That's good Muay Thai. That's good passing. So it's got to be good back attacking too.
A lot harder than.
Yeah, it's got to be the way to do the back too.
Yeah.
But it's the hardest thing, I think. And so I'm willing to invest the time in it, but I think I could be shortcutted a little bit if I felt it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I got a question on the footlocks.
Yeah.
Right? And you get the whole priority and triage for newer people. At what point do you think it would be good to start investing time and actually, like,
The earlier the better.
Okay.
There's nothing mysterious or inherently different or inherently dangerous about footlocks. If the person teaching it is being proactive about supervising people, if the people are training rather than fighting, I mean, not before people can do a shrimp, right? Not before people can kind of deal with just holding close guard, not, they're so immobile or uncoordinated or weak that their legs pop open on their own, but not at brown belt either.
No.
Let's say whenever, okay, here's a good one. Everyone has their own moment at which their curriculum opens up and people go into, like, general population, right? The Gracie Academy has their, combatives, You guys have foundations, and But as soon as someone is like put out into general population and you have a rotating curriculum, I don't see any reason not to have that as part.
No, I agree. If you take a group of people, those kind of classes like we have at our gym, it always makes, so when in cap class you might have somebody that's been training 3 months and somebody that's been training 6 years, which is fine. The way we teach, because we're focused on fundamentals. But then you also have the ideal situation that people tend to fantasize about, of like you have a group of students, they all start at the same time, at which point do you introduce them to what?
Right.
Which is not how most of us are able to do it, because the way Jiu-Jitsu works with people signing up all the time. But in that particular situation, that wouldn't be something I could envision handing off to people until they were already at a point where they're passing and holding open guard.
Yeah.
In a way, So then we can put it in as an additional tool to help facilitate that.
Yeah. I don't think SBG yet has a kind of set curriculum.
No, we just have our core foundations to get people introduced, and then it's a rotating one after that.
But if you look at something, I really like Henry's white to blue.
Yeah.
Because that is a really, it's like, okay, and here he's going to punch you, right? It's going to start on the feet and he's going to punch you. And there's, he has a good balance of you're on your back, you're on your feet.
Standing on the ground.
Right. Throwing, punching, everything, kicking. I think if you got through a curriculum like that, then it's a perfect time to start introducing it.
Sure.
You see it with competition and with fighting, but it doesn't seem like, and just, I may be speaking out of turn here, but it doesn't seem like there's much of an emphasis needed on it at all if you're talking in terms of self-defense.
Correct. That's why I was mentioning like Henry's white to blue is not. He doesn't discuss points.
No.
He does discuss someone punching you in the face, right? So once you're through that and you understand like the way when I was at Rikson's for my blue belt, before I got it, but soon before I got it, Luis made the comment to us all. He's like, white to blue belt. Basically, if you get a blue belt, at least what we're teaching at Rikson's, it's like you're not gonna lose a fight.
You can fight.
Yeah, you're not going to lose a fight to a guy who knows nothing. You might get unlucky and meet an Olympic judoka or something, but 1 out of 1,000,000 people are Olympic judoka or D1 wrestler or whatever. It's like the fights you're thinking of, A, they're avoidable, and B, you're going to win if you have a blue belt, right? And so if that's all you wanted, that's all you need. But then if you want to do jiu-jitsu, and that's what he said, from blue belt on, jiu-jitsu is just to test your jiu-jitsu against another guy who does jiu-jitsu, and that should be fun. But you already know how to fight, right? And so now you're a purple belt. You want to see if you can hang with other purple belts. And you're a brown belt. Can you hang with other brown belts? So right after that white to blue curriculum, no one's going to hold you down in a headlock. No one's going to be able to sucker punch you. No one's going to be able to do any of that stuff to you. And if they do, you're going to wind up on top, punching them or choking them unconscious. But after that, it's like you want to train for 30, 40, 50 years and you want it to be fun. And then it's like, okay, maybe I'm young and I want to do tournaments. Well, then leg locks come in. Maybe I'm old like me and I don't want to do tournaments, but I want to coach people who do tournaments. And so I still need to understand that game. And, so.
Yeah.
But it's more optional unless you're doing.
For sure.
So a great distinction that I only heard about a year ago from Henry is there's jiu-jitsu and there's submission grappling. Mm-hmm. And so, leg locks are part of submission grappling, whether that's gi legal IBJJF leg locks or no gi heel hooks and all that. Basically, it's a trained grappling response to the problem I'm giving. It's not a self-defense. Yeah, it's not a self-defense situation. And so it's in that sense, it's optional.
Yeah, some of the coaches will run thought experiments by me sometimes. Adam does this a lot with his question that he'll pose. It's like, okay, you have 3 weeks to train a group of people, and what are the 5 things you're going to show them, that kind of thing.
Not leg locks.
No, on any of those kind of lists, leg locks aren't anywhere on the list, right? You've got your headlock escapes and guillotine counters and guillotine and body lock, mount, bridge and roll.
Yep.
You got 10,000 things that you put on the list before footlock. We're talking about fighting. It really is a trained grappler versus trained grappler type scenario. And even back then I knew, because in the late 90s and early 2000s, I did get a chance to roll with a lot of quote-unquote submission grapplers, not jiu-jitsu submission grapplers, but like the Shuto guys and even some Sambo guys, and never experienced anything close to a problem of escaping a foot box, because everything was loose and you could just, there was no positional control.
Right. Yeah.
It was basically just flowing from one lock to the other, which is exactly what you want to train people not to do.
Right. Right.
So that's changed now, because like you said, the jiu-jitsu guys who are doing that are high-level black belts at everything, and they have the leg locks.
Yeah. And they're using their previous knowledge to treat leg locks like mount or cross sides, where it's like, first, how do I hold you here?
Yeah.
How do I immobilize you? How do I make this, I'm 100% offense and you're 100% on defense? And then they'll grab your foot.
Right.
You know, it's totally different than just grabbing and hoping.
Yeah.
And that's part of the danger thing too, is because there was no positional control, I either had to go slow, in which case you'd spin out, and so it's like that doesn't work anyway, or I had to go so fast that you were injured before you could tap, and it's, well, it works, but it's too dangerous. So two opposite ends of the spectrum, both arguing for why you can't do this or shouldn't do this.
Right. Well, before we finish, I want to add an off-the-wall question for you.
Yeah, I like that.
What do you think about what's been going on the last couple of years with the UFO, UAP stuff?
So I don't follow it that closely, and you help me not to need to, because it's like, really, I mean, I'm not, that's not a joke. I'm very lazy. I don't like the news. I don't like the newspaper.
Is it on the news in Korea?
No.
Nothing? Okay.
I mean, but I don't know, because I don't watch the news. So I don't read newspapers in America or Korea. I don't watch the news in America or Korea. I know some people like that. It's not really philosophical. I kind of like, my personality was already tending in that direction, and I built a philosophy to justify it. I wasn't interested in the news, and so I'm still not interested in the news. But then I realized also, if something is either really important or it's not important but it's really popular, I'm going to hear about it without reading. People are talking about it, and so if it's going to change my life, probably someone's already telling me about it. I don't need to be glued to the news. And so for UFOs, UAPs, I feel like you're going to give me the high points, right? And you see, if you enjoy watching the news, that's great, and you enjoy following this, and that's great, because there's a lot of good information there, and it's a lot of entertainment there. For me, since I don't really enjoy it, I read. I'm bad with titles.
Ross Cohort's In Plain Sight.
Yeah, read that because you recommended it. If I have a strong recommendation, I'll go to that recommendation, but I'm not kind of following it to follow it.
What did you think of that book?
Good. I think right at this point, I think, there are enough credible people with nothing to gain and sometimes a lot to lose coming out. Yeah. So why do you come out when you're a Stanford scientist who is already very wealthy because you've already commercialized and monetized all of these really high-tech things that you came up with because you're kind of a genius and you're a hard worker and now you're rich and you're tenured at Stanford.
So you're talking about Gary Dolan.
Yeah, and what do you have to gain? Because you have everything to lose. Like, people start taking the investments out of your company. He's a crackpot.
Right.
Stanford starts thinking about cutting your funding because you're a crackpot and you're tarnishing their reputation. A lot to lose, nothing to gain, and you're coming out. And when they come out, it's like, oh, did that guy get hit in the head? They're coming out completely lucid and every inch the Stanford science professor, and you're just like, oh, no. It's not if, it's how much, and it's not if, it's when, and just like unequivocally. And scientists are not unequivocal about a lot of things. Scientists are, the problem with social science, which is an oxymoron.
Which neither of us would call science.
It's an oxymoron, right? Is that they're overconfident about everything and wrong about most of it. Whereas real scientists are underconfident about everything and right more often than they're not, because they don't really go out on a limb until they're 99.9% sure that they've tested this a million times in their lab. It keeps happening the same way, and then they'll come out.
Yeah.
And so he's coming out, on TV publicly, and it's like, at that point, it's like, that's pretty credible.
Yeah.
Have I been there and seen what he's seen? Nobody's not saying I'm guessing. He's like, no, like, and he's naming the CIA too, right? That right there is, unless you have all your ducks in a row, that's a dangerous thing to say. Like the CIA came to me and asked me these questions and showed me these documents. I mean, if he was fabricating that information, they'd be knocking on his door.
Oh yeah.
Like, what are you talking about us for? You don't know us.
Right.
But they're like, oh yeah, well, we kind of let him do that. You know? So yeah.
The only people he didn't name specifically.
The capitalists.
The
money.
The aerospace contractors.
Yeah.
That's the more secret part.
Yeah. But they have less official power to go after him, and CIA would have more official power to go after him.
Yeah.
Less money, more official power.
Absolutely.
And he's just, and it's probably because probably signed a non-disclosure agreement.
Oh yeah.
With the capitalists.
Yeah, they all have to sign the NDAs.
Right. They're like, we'll show you this, but
yeah.
you can't name us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, for that's just one of 30 examples, but that was the most recent because I saw him most recently, and it's like, I haven't seen what he's seen, but I trust him. There was not one point in that whole thing where I thought, oh, I'd ask him this, or I'd argue that, or maybe he's exaggerating. It was kind of like, yes.
So let's assume, we'll play a hypothetical, and let's assume that within the next, because it's going to take a while for it to filter down.
Sure.
Right? In the next 2 or 3 years, a sizable percentage of the population has figured out what you just figured out. Do you think that there's going to be panic?
No.
You don't think so?
No, because I think I thought this before I saw him,
Yeah.
but then he said exactly what I thought, which made me think I was on the right track.
Yeah.
If you believe even half of the information about the capabilities in terms of speed, in terms of changing directions, in terms of going from air to water back to air, the capabilities.
Yeah.
And then the sort of mind reading capabilities, like they're already at the secret rendezvous point that nobody divulged, like all of that.
Right.
Or they're like, how do they know to be right over a top secret missile silo that doesn't exist on paper?
Right.
Then they could have killed us all 1,000,000 years ago, or 100 years ago, or yesterday.
Right.
If they've been this hard to find, you know, because it seems like when we find them, it's a mistake. They have a malfunction or whatever, they crash land somewhere.
Or they want to be found.
Right, but they want to be found like the Old Testament God wants to be seen.
Yeah.
By 2 or 3 people who
Yes.
you may or may not believe.
That's right. Yeah.
If the Old Testament God really wanted to be believed by everyone, he'd just come down and show you something. Okay, I believe you.
Yeah.
He came down and turned this into something else, I'd probably believe him too.
I think I mentioned that I was thinking in particular about the Nimitz episode where you had them descending on a fleet of ships. Like clearly they weren't worried about being seen there.
Yeah.
But they're also out in the middle of the ocean, and it's just going to be the military season. It's not going to be a bunch of tourists or people living on land.
So anyway,
So you don't think there'll be a panic?
I hope there won't be. I think it'll be gradual enough, and also the people like with Gary Nolan, who obviously has a lot more
I think that's what they're gaming out.
mainstream television pull than I do, since I'm never on television. And he said what I had thought, which was comforting.
Yeah.
Which was, I mean, we'd all be gone if they want us gone.
For sure.
It's like whatever's out there isn't trying to wipe us out.
Just push an asteroid towards the planet tomorrow and we'd be dead.
Yeah, or I mean, they obviously, whatever our most sophisticated weapon systems were, they're like, I don't like that, shut it off.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, they're not worried about us.
Right.
And they're not concerned with killing us or we'd all be dead. So, you know, whatever it is seems to be fairly benevolent and not wanting to hurt us or change anything we're really doing. Because when there are encounters, it's like very, it could be like, I mean, I think some of the military pilots come away with it think like, oh my God, I couldn't have done anything. And they could have done whatever they wanted, but they never do. So, yeah, I think it would be like me saying, do I want to get in a fist fight with Zach? No, I do not want to get a fist fight with them. I think it would go bad for me. But will it ever happen unless I punch him in the face first? No, it'll never happen unless I punch him in the face first. I think we're in that kind of relationship with them. If no one tries to like find them and blow them up aggressively, I think they're going to leave us alone, more or less.
I agree, which is a good note to think about it.
Yeah.
I'll actually put the name of the book in the URL below our podcast, so if anybody's wondering why the hell are they talking about this and what are they talking about, you can see the book that we're referencing for anybody that's interested. But awesome, it's been great to talk to you, John.
It's always good to be here. Yeah, thanks, Zach.